Okay, welcome to week 10. This week we're talking about human resource management and communication plans. So first of all, planning human resources is super critical to project success. Matter of fact, it's the most important piece. Human resources are really your most important resources. They're the things that are going to, that's what's going to get your project done. If you don't have human resources, then you're not going to get anywhere. So there are a few things that you need to think about as you think about human resources. Number one is you need to plan your human resource need, and that is one of the main aspects of what you'll turn in this week as far as your human resource plan is think about what human needs you're going to need. If I'm planning a house, I'm going to need maybe a general contractor, but I'm going to need somebody to do concrete, somebody to do framing, somebody to do plumbing, somebody who's going to put up the sheetrock. There are human resources that I'm going to need in order to do that, and I would list those all out, and they'd come out as far as the WBS would help me to solve that, and listing out all of the pieces that I'm going to need is going to help me solve that. So then once I've put that together, then I'm going to go out and acquire a project team. Now, if I'm in an organization and I have internal resources, then I'm going to make sure I have availability of resources, that the accountants can come work on it, or that my framers, what their schedule is, how that's going to apply into my new project that I'm just planning. And so I can do that, or I can also acquire a team. I could get a contractor, I could get somebody outside to provide that skill. And then as I do that, I'll need to set very clear expectations about what each one of them is responsible for and who is responsible for it. To do this, a RACI chart is something that it talks about, RACI, in our textbook. What does a RACI chart stand for? Do a little bit of research and tell me about it. Okay, great. So that will help you people to know who's responsible for what and who needs to be communicated with and all of that. So then you need to develop the team. There are things that you're going to, because this is a project, it's time-based. It means that you're just going to be together for a short time. You're not a long-term manager. You're not going to necessarily be developing people over years and years and years. It's that you're going to bring them in for this specific project, you're going to get it done, you're going to then release them back to whatever they were doing. It's something we often in project management call forming a team, putting it together. Storming, in other words, figuring out where everything goes and how you're all going to work together. Norming is when things just kind of come to the point where everybody understands what each other does and where they're all where all the skills fit in. Performing, which is where the bulk of the project is done, and then adjourning, getting done, and disbanding until the next project. Maybe you'll come back together. And then setting clear ground rules and early commitment is super critical in this aspect. So you'll need to set quick deliverables, because you can tell usually within the first few weeks how your project's going to go. Even if your project is years long, if you don't have those early commitments from people and have early deliverables, then you can often fall into a state of not delivering. And then the last one is managing the project team. Okay, and in managing the project team, there are certain things you need to look out for. You need to be able to resolve conflict and understand how to help people work together. You've probably, and by design, experience some of that in your teams this semester. Some of you and most of you have worked through those issues. You've been able to figure out a communication plan that's worked for you. You've done some of the things that we've talked about: forming, storming, norming, performing. In some cases, though, you've had to manage somebody off your team, or people have elected to leave teams because they're not getting the kind of results, and that happens. It can completely disrupt a team to have to deal with that later on, but you need to manage that team behavior and be able to resolve conflicts. Now, one of the great things about being a project manager is that you don't have to do a lot of the human resource stuff. You don't have to worry so much about firing people or those kinds of things, but you do need to accomplish a project, and you do need to develop the team for that project, and so that's where human resource management comes into play. What are your thoughts about human resource management? How important is it, and how can you do it well as a project manager? Excellent. Now let's talk about communication plans. Now, we've talked about human resource management and we've talked about a project team, and communicating within that project team is very important, and it's important to have a communication plan to help that happen. I remember specifically on a project I was working on discovery centers where we didn't have a clear communication plan, and the client felt completely in the dark, felt like the production team was not talking to them, that they weren't getting regular updates, and all it came down to is just setting a clear expectation of what the client was, what it was they wanted. The production team was happy to provide updates. They just didn't know when and where to do it, and that's what a communication plan helps to do. And so you set up a communication early on, and then of course revise it as needed. You'll also need to communicate with stakeholders, and you'll need to set that up right up front as well. And how do you best communicate with stakeholders? So that's it for the video this week. Please let me know if you have any questions. 801-884-9988. Thanks.